BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Well, what can we say? Today is September 11th, and it is September 11th of 2020. One of the things that I realized this year was that next year is going to be the 20th anniversary of September 11th, which is not only a day that we all remember because of patriotic spirit, it is, of course, the anniversary of the largest mass murder in U.S. history. And it is a day that is a tragedy for many, but I remember this very clearly because, as we said, it was 19 years ago, but still, it's not something that one can easily forget. And after September 11th, the amount of patriotic spirit throughout the country was just completely overwhelming. And people were proud to fly the American flag, and they were just everywhere. It really was something that was a moment of unity. As as tragic as the situation was, we all came together in support. Last year, when we were talking about September 11th, we did mention one thing. It was a little 2-minute upload that was kind of like this, except only 2 minutes long. And I did share one thing that I would just like to bring back, and that is that I was listening to this podcast from Emergence Magazine, and they were talking about how some people say knock on wood when they want to share good luck. I mean, like you say, you knock on wood for good luck. What you can do instead is next time you can say enrich with possibility. I've been doing that ever since I heard that thing a year ago, and I still do that to this day. We shared that on Black Box Online Radio, and it's something that I think about in September 11th, always because of the memorial that we did on the channel, but the time frame matches up. But I mean, I would just like to leave people with that, and it's also a reminder of optimism, because as many people will post online, they will just say that they will never forget where they were when they learned that the Twin Towers had been struck, as well as the Pentagon, and of course Flight 93, which was most likely destined for the White House. However, Flight 93, of course, went down. They made a couple movies about that, United 93 and Flight 93. I saw both of them. However, I think it's United 93, I think, that is the Paul Greengrass film that is a little bit more famous. They also made, of course, the movie World Trade Center with Nicolas Cage. I have not seen that one yet. I heard that United 93 was definitely a better film that was talking about September 11th, but I might give World Trade Center a chance in the future. Maybe, as we said, next year for the 20th anniversary, that could be something to do. But I remember being in the 8th grade on September 11th, 2001, and we had a football game, and we had a football game scheduled that day, and believe it or not, I was an athlete back in the day, and I was an absolutely horrible football player. I was what you called a bench warmer, but I was still on the team, so we were supposed to be getting on the bus and going to this football game. Then we just heard this announcement that the game was canceled, and then, of course, people in school like, oh, it sucks, our football game is canceled. And then there was this guy named Scott who was just like, do you know why the game's canceled? We're like, oh, Scott, you're always weird. You always talk in such a weird way. It's because of the terrorists. And he said it that way, and people are just like, oh, you can't listen to Scott. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But that was the one time, the only time, that Scott actually said something that turned out to be true. It's just, when people are in the 8th grade, we're dealing with what, age 12 and 13. Sometimes they don't always communicate things in a way that is, the emotions don't always match up with the subject material. Let's just say that. So after we learned that the game was canceled, eventually the teacher just had to bring everybody together. It's like, all right, I have an announcement. Some people hijacked some airplanes and they flew them on top of the World Trade Center. That's the way I heard it, on top of the World Trade Center. Like, I was imagining that this was something like a biplane that made some type of landing on top of the World Trade Center. I hear terrorists. I thought hostage situation. I mean, that's the way that I heard it. But of course, what she was talking about is that planes had flown into the World Trade Center. And then, I mean, you know the story, you know what happened next. And then it was just, that's all you would see. That's all you would see. Like, it was just the only thing that anyone could think about or talk about, and for very good reason, because there was really nothing like that in my lifetime up until that point, September 11th, 2001, that had rattled the country in such a way. And definitely not ever since. Something of that magnitude. We've had many tragedies, but of that magnitude, I do not think so, because one of the reasons why people talk about this is very simple, and I would like to explain this in somewhat of an elongated way. Somebody was posting about this online, and they're saying that there were more people that died as a result of Hurricane Katrina than in the September 11th attacks. They're like, why is there so much a focus on the victims of a terrorist attack compared to the victims of a natural disaster? A human life is a human life. Having that type of discussion. And the reason why people zone in on something such as September 11th is, first and foremost, they want to honor the dead that were killed by human life, humans killing other humans, hijacking planes, flying them into buildings, humans killing other humans. That is definitely a different type of evil as opposed to the damage that is received from a hurricane, a natural disaster. And the second reason is it's about terror getting into the homeland. That's the point. That's the angle. And that's what people are discussing. That's what people are really just zoning in on, and that's why it left such an impact. Not, I mean, yes, of course, because there was a very large loss of human life, but also I heard this on an episode of Law and Order. They said that September 11th was not just a terrorist attack. It was the largest mass murder in the history of our country. That's why I said those words at the beginning. I heard that on an episode of Law and Order, and that is something that I think really stands out amongst, well, any other like all other events pale in comparison to something like that. Some of the things that I have heard about September 11th is that the Jonestown massacre in Guyana, talking about Jim Jones, the People's Temple, the cult leader, the drink the Kool-Aid guy, prior to September 11th, his massacre in Georgetown, Guyana, or thereabouts in the surroundings of Georgetown, Guyana, was the largest death of American life on a single day. But I mean, like you had people in hundreds, or the largest mass killing, we should say, that would exclude any type of war, of course. And prior to that, then September 11th, and of course, greatly superseded that. I mean, if you're going to talk about 3,000 people plus died on September 11th, I think it was only around 900 people who died in Jonestown. And please do not quote me on those statistics 100%, but it's thereabouts. The big thing that we need to say is, though, if Americans or from whatever country you're listening from, there is no way to differentiate the value of a human life. A human is a human, but all we can really say is just, it is a tragedy. We'll remember the fallen, and some people never got their lives back together, and they still deal with the loss of their particular relative, of the member of their family, of the person that was very close to them on the September 11th attack, because you just can't imagine what it's like to live without somebody in your life until it actually happens, and then there's just no turning back. I was very fortunate not to have anyone in my family that was personally impacted on September. No one was in New York City or Washington, D.C., but being here in West Virginia, my part of that state is actually somewhat close to Washington, D.C. My sister was actually babysitting for a boy who lived down the road, and it wasn't until about a month after babysitting him she learned the reason why they were hiring babysitters all the time, and it was because his mother had died in the Pentagon. She worked in Washington, D.C. and lived in West Virginia, and she died in the Pentagon. And it's like, then, she just really just never looked at that kid the same way again. And, just shared a little bit more empathy and was way more sympathetic to certain things and became so much more easygoing toward him once she learned about how, he had been affected by that. And he was only 5 at the time. But still, at the same time, he had lost his mother, and children are definitely going to be aware of that. Now, there's something else that I would like to share in terms of the patriotic American spirit, and this is going to sound a little bit odd, but I was listening to an episode of The Simpsons recently. It was actually a couple weeks ago, and I heard something from Nelson Muntz, of all people, and we're going to play a little clip here, and we're going to just share some of the patriotic American spirit. And we'll...
So burn the flag if you must, but before you do, you better burn a few other things. You better burn your shirt and your pants. Be sure to burn your TV and car. Oh yes, and don't forget to burn
that was an episode of The Simpsons, and that is the voice of Nelson Muntz right there. Now, I had never seen that episode as a kid, or if I did, I didn't remember it. But I just really liked the enthusiasm in that. Do you ever just have those moments when you're watching a TV show or you're listening to a program and you're just like, wow, that one line or that one paragraph or that one just anything, that just really stands out to you? That's the way I felt listening to that one there. That was something else that I wanted to share. And overall, though, the impacts of September 11th are still carrying on. We talked about how the victims have been impacted, but let alone, what about the war in Afghanistan and the situation there and military action? So many things happened after 9/11. And one of the points that people often talk about, I mean, I was about to use the word trivia, but I think it's a little bit greater than the word trivia, is that after September 11th happened, there was a vote in the Senate for two things: emergency, services for fire workers, an emergency bill for relief workers in the city, as well as military involvement in Afghanistan. And in both houses of Congress, the very famous line is that Barbara Lee, the representative from California, I think from the 13th district, she was the only person in both houses of Congress to vote against military involvement in Afghanistan. But that's the famous line. But the actual sort of trivial thing is Senator Lincoln Chafee of Rhode Island actually voted against military involvement in Afghanistan as well. But then his staff begged him to change his vote, and then he changed his vote because he didn't want to deal with people saying bad things about him, and his political career turned out like a block of granite. But that's just something else that I always think about. It comes up, when people often bring up Barbara Lee, and she was the only person to vote against military involvement. But there was also an individual named Jeremy Glick. I almost said Jiminy Glick. I can't believe I almost did that. No, his name was Jeremy Glick, and he went on the O'Reilly Factor, and he was the guy who had practiced with a stopwatch to learn how long it takes Bill O'Reilly to start shouting, and he wanted to really weave around Bill O'Reilly's argumentative strategy. And his name was Jeremy Glick, and he was on there because his father died in the Twin Towers attack, but he was completely against military involvement in Afghanistan because he simply said on the O'Reilly Factor, back when that was a show, he said that, why would I want to brutalize the people of Afghanistan, or why would I want the people of Afghanistan to be brutalized? And that was just a comment that he made, as somebody who lost his father on September 11th, and there really are multiple sides of the issue. Now, I'm not going to go down the 9/11 truth conspiracy model right now, but I would just say a lot of people have many things to say about it. I've been looking at a lot of memes today when people have been sharing stuff online talking about September 11th. They're just like jet fuel melting steel beams. Maybe we can talk about that in the future. Maybe we can talk about some of the conspiracy theories that people have, or the 9/11 truth agenda, about what they have to say about Building 7 or even Building 6, and we can say a lot. But I don't really think now is the appropriate time for that, because right now I just think that today is almost a day of national mourning. It's a day when we need to recognize that there is one America, there is one humanity. How does that song go? What is it, Peter, Paul, and Mary? They used it in the movie Airplane. There's only one river, there's only one sea, and it flows to you, and it flows to me. There's only one people. We are one and the same. I mean, that's what I think we should be looking forward to. And we should also recognize that the people who were involved, the terrorists in September 11th, are criminal thugs. That's one of the few things where I would actually agree with Michael Moore. One of the few points where I would actually agree with somebody like Michael Moore in saying that the people who committed the September 11th attacks were criminal thugs. And that's pretty much all they are. A lot of things have gone on after that. I mean, we saw the death of Osama bin Laden, the imprisonment of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and, there really is a lot of things that come out. And I gotta tell you, as somebody who's sitting back, watching the news, it is never clear. The mainstream media, the evening news, they will give you fragments of the truth about these things, like, oh, they're investigating the connections between Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and bin Laden, and they never just give it to you all piece by piece, but they'll just say, okay, this guy was involved in 9/11, this other guy was involved with 9/11, this guy's name is Zacharias Moussaoui, he was involved with 9/11, and they don't tell you how all of it's connected, and that is a big thing. The historian James Loewen even talked about this when he was promoting his book, Lies My Teacher Told Me. He also wrote the book, Lies Across America. And what he was simply saying is, that's the way we're educated in the United States of America. We're given lots of events, but what is rarely discussed in the history classroom, or perhaps even on the evening news and the mainstream media and anything like that, is cause and effect. How did this event cause this effect, cause this effect? And the whole concept of how history can be a type of snowball effect, that these events happened and they escalated the situation, and then the situation led to something very chaotic. And these are the reasons why. And I mean, I really have to completely agree with that. And then he expands upon that, talking about how it becomes a breeding ground for conspiratorial thought, because then Jesse Walker also talked about this in his book, The United States of Paranoia, when he was like, the human brain is a pattern-seeking device, using that metaphorically. But as human beings, we are pattern-seeking individuals. So no matter what set of events we have, we try to put it in a pattern so that we can understand it. Human beings have a great desire to understand things, and they will try to arrange it in a series of events. But when you want to talk about understanding things in terms of human empathy, I cannot understand the reasons why people would want to fly airplanes into the Twin Towers or the Pentagon. That is something that is just always out of my realm of comprehension. Either that, or just to say that there are very destructive things happens, and we talked about it on this channel in the episode where we mentioned Dr. Keith Suter, the conspiracy versus the cock-up. And the point that Keith Suter was arguing in that one, and I don't necessarily agree with it 100%, but he was saying that sometimes we just have to admit that bad things happen. Sometimes we have to admit that tragedies happen. But I think that's mostly true, except for the fact that from time to time, you will find out that there are interconnections. Nothing in life is completely free-floating. It is connected to something in an interlocking way. And I think that's what James Loewen was really trying to talk about when he was saying that we need to learn about these types of connections and learn the role of cause and effect in our life to see how things happen, to get a clearer picture of the historical timelines, because a lot of the things that people are saying about 9/11 truth are probably not completely correct, because they're saying so many different theories that, it was Dick Cheney, or that it was the European oligarchs, or that it was the Israeli Mossad. I mean, are all these things true, or are people simply trying to highlight the concept of corruption and the concept of the military-industrial complex and the pressures that it puts on the Middle East, and that forces people to respond in a destructive way? I don't agree with that last statement, because, as I said, I cannot comprehend why people would still just go to the level of flying airplanes into buildings in such a destructive manner, especially like in the way in which 9/11 was committed. I do not understand that on an empathetic level or sympathetic level, and I feel nothing but, I shouldn't even say that. I mean, I feel nothing for the terrorists who were involved with this, and as well as anyone with the plotting and planning of September 11th. And I think that's where I would have to leave it for them. I don't want to give them another ounce of time, and instead, I would like to simply mourn the victims. But there's a big issue, though, about how you handle the stories of the victims. First and foremost, we were having this discussion once, and somebody was posting about this. It was on a blog, actually, in the comments section. I'm doing a little bit of back and forth with somebody, and they were talking about a different tragedy, and they said, I want to think about the victims, and I want to share their stories. But I heard somebody else offer a different opinion, saying, when it comes to sharing the stories of the victims, that should be reserved entirely for the family members, and the friends, and the people close to them. They're the ones who lost their friend, their family member, their brother, their sister, their mother, their father. They're the ones who lost that individual. It should be their choice how the story of their family members represented. Because I have to tell you that we talk a lot about true crime on this channel, and a lot of people are very clear when they say that they just don't want to talk to the media about their family. Like, they want to keep the media out of their family story. They just want to return to private life. And, reporters have questions, investigators have questions, and even just people want to write stories about somebody in their family. And of course, we're dealing with something a little bit different with 9/11, and definitely something different with victims of 9/11 as opposed to victims of, perhaps you say, a murder story. But other people are like, we've experienced a tragedy. We don't want to talk to any press and media. And I can kind of comprehend the latter when they're saying that you let the families decide how their loved ones get represented. Well, if you have anything to say at all, I would love to hear from you. Please drop something in the comments section below. And once again, BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram. What do you have to say about 9/11? And all I can say is 2020 has been a crazy year, but I hope everybody is staying safe. And that's all to say. God bless America.